Imagine a building that burns to the ground, not all at once, not in a blaze anyone saw coming. Imagine the kind of fire that an investigator walks into long after, when the smoke has lifted and the floor is still warm under the boots, and the only thing left to read is the story written in the char. Imagine that investigator crouching in the ash, running a gloved finger along a scorch line, tilting his head at the way the burn climbs the walls, and feeling something tighten at the base of the skull. A recognition that has no business being there, because this fire looks familiar. Imagine pulling a second file, an older fire, a different building, a different city, a different century, almost. A case closed long ago, stamped and shelved and ruled on paper as something ordinary. And imagine laying the two scenes side by side under the same lamp and seeing it. The same accelerant, the same signature, the same scorch, climbing the same kind of wall. Now imagine the detail that makes the back of the neck go cold. It isn't that someone broke in. There's no forced door, no shattered glass, no splintered frame, no sign of an intruder anywhere on the scene. The fire didn't break in. The fire was let in, both times. And imagine you find the notices, stacked in a drawer, yellowed at the edges, warning after warning after warning, slid under the same door, season after season, signed by inspector after inspector. The wiring is exposed, the exits are blocked. This structure will burn. Every one of them delivered, every one of them read, every one of them ignored. Imagine standing in the ruins of the second building, holding the file on the first, and understanding for the first time that you are not looking at two accidents. You are not even looking at two crimes. You're looking at a pattern, and a pattern means there can be a third. Imagine learning there is a third, and imagine the thing that empties the air out of the room. The warning notice for the third fire, the fire that hasn't happened yet, has already been written. It's already been printed. It's already been slid under the door. It is being read at this very moment by people who think it's a notice about somebody else's building. Same accelerant, same signature, same door, unlocked from the inside. The case was never two fires. The case is three, and the third one hasn't burned yet. Welcome to Cracked Wide Open, where Bible mysteries aren't just explained, they're investigated like cold cases. Each episode, we analyze the sermons of Pastor Ivor Myers, reopening the text, following the clues, and uncover truths that have been hiding in plain sight. There is a phrase that moves through the Bible like a thread of smoke. You can pick it up near the front of the Old Testament and follow it, drifting all the way to the back of the New. Different writers, different centuries, different cities, different crises, different kings on different thrones, and they all reach, independently, for the same four words: the day of the Lord. It sounds, the first time it crosses your ear, like a single event, one catastrophe at the end of history. The lights go out, the sky tears open, the earth gives way, the world ends. That's how almost everyone files it. One day, one ending, somewhere far off, over the curve of the future, where it can't quite reach you. But here is the first thing that doesn't fit. Pastor Myers slows down on that phrase, and the moment he does, the single event begins to splinter in your hands. Because when you actually open the files, when you stop reading the words and start reading the scene, when you ask who is speaking, and when, and to whom, and about what, you do not find one day of the Lord. You find three distinct days of the Lord in the Bible, three separate scenes, three separate fires, spread across centuries, filed at the time as unrelated, slid into different drawers by different prophets who on the surface appear to be describing completely different disasters in completely different ages to completely different people. And that's the case. Not When is the day of the Lord? That's the question everybody asks, and it's the wrong one. It's the question of a spectator. Pastor Myers asks the question, an arson investigator asks, the moment the second building matches the first. The question that turns a tragedy into an investigation. Why does it keep happening? Because 3 fires with the same signature is no longer a story about fire. It's a story about cause. And the most disturbing possibility in this entire file, the one the evidence keeps pressing into your hand, whether you want it or not, is that there is no arsonist. Not an outside one. Not an intruder slipping over the wall in the dark. The fire was let in, from the inside, every single time, by the people who held the notices in their own hands, who read every warning, and who unlocked the door anyway. So we have to do this the way you'd work a genuine cold case, slowly, in order, no leaping to the verdict. We pull the first fire, and we establish the signature, exactly what was burned, and exactly what poured the accelerant. Then we pull the second fire, and we test whether the signature holds, whether the fingerprint repeats. And only then, only once we know with certainty what we are looking at, do we let ourselves turn to the third file. Because here is the part that should keep you in your seat all the way to the end. 2 of these fires are history, closed cases, cities that burned and were rebuilt and burned again. The third one is the only one still in the future. And if the pattern is real, if the signature truly repeats, then the first 2 fires are not just history. They're a forecast. They tell us, with forensic precision, exactly what lights the third. Start where every cold case starts, with the oldest scene on the table. Pastor Myers opens to a prophet named Isaiah, and the very first words out of the file land like a struck match. Howl ye, for the day of the Lord is at hand. It shall come as a destruction from the Almighty. Read that cold, with no context, and it sounds like the end of everything. Apocalypse, fire from the sky, the final curtain. And that's exactly how it gets filed, as a prophecy of the last day of the world. But watch the investigative move here, because this single move is the one that cracks the entire case wide open. Pastor Myers does not ask, what does it sound like? That's how you misread a crime scene, by deciding in advance what story you're going to tell. He asks the only question that matters when you walk into a room where something terrible has happened. Who is in the room? And Isaiah is not shouting into the far future. He is standing in front of a specific people, in a specific city, in a specific and dangerous hour. He is speaking to Israel, to Jerusalem, and the destruction he is howling about is not the end of the planet. It's an army. It's Babylon. The day of the Lord that Isaiah warns of is the day Babylon comes over the walls of Jerusalem and burns the city to its foundations. It is using the language of the end of the world to describe the end of a city. Cosmic words, a local fire. And the instant you see that, the file changes character in your hands. It stops being a vague mood of doom and becomes a fingerprint. Because now, you know exactly what you're looking for. And once you know what you're looking for, you start finding it on every wall of the building. Pastor Myers walks us through them one after another, and the effect is cumulative. The way an investigator lays photograph after photograph on a table until the room goes quiet. Exhibit. Lamentations. The young and the old lie on the ground in the streets. My virgins and my young men are fallen by the sword. Thou hast slain them in the day of thine anger. The same fire. Exhibit. Ezekiel. They shall cast their silver in the streets. Their silver and their gold shall not be able to deliver them in the day of the wrath of the Lord. The same fire. Exhibit. Ezekiel again. Ye have not gone up into the gaps, to stand in the battle in the day of the Lord. The same fire. Exhibit. Zephaniah, the day of the Lord is at hand. That day is a day of wrath, a day of trouble and distress, a day of wasteness and desolation, a day of darkness and gloominess, a day of clouds and thick darkness. The same fire. And here's the pattern inside the pattern, the structural clue. Pastor Myers will not let us walk past. Line up every prophet who uses this language about the first fire, and they share one trait. One, they all wrote before it happened, before Babylon came, before the siege, before the walls broke and the gates burned. They are what scholars call the pre-exilic prophets, the men standing inside the building while it is still standing, holding the inspection notice up to the light, reading it aloud in the street. The wiring is exposed. The exits are blocked. This structure will burn. Repent. Return. Turn back from your wickedness, or the day of the Lord comes upon you. Warning after warning slid under the same door, and the door stayed shut. So the first fire burned. Babylon came over the walls. The temple fell. The city was leveled exactly as the notices said it would be, and every prophet who warned of it was vindicated by the smoke. That's scene one. Established, catalogued, sealed. The day of the Lord. First occurrence, not the end of the world, but the end of a city that was warned and warned and warned and would not listen. But here's the thing about an investigator. He doesn't close on one scene. He can't. One scene is a tragedy. One scene is just a building that burned. It's only when the second file lands on the desk that the real work begins. And the second file does something that, frankly, should not be possible. It uses the same words. Here's where the timeline does something strange enough to make you read it twice. Babylon burns Jerusalem. The city falls. The survivors are dragged into exile. And then, years later, the impossible happens. They come home. The captivity ends. The Jews return to the ruins, and stone by stone they rebuild. New walls, new gates, a new temple rising on the old foundation. A second chance, written in mortar, a clean file, and a new set of prophets rises with the new walls. Now watch what these new prophets begin to say. Watch closely, because this is where one day of the Lord splits into two. If the day of the Lord already happened, if Babylon was the fire, and the fire is out, and the ashes are cold, then these new men should be talking about something else entirely. Some new subject, some new threat. They're not. They reach for the exact same four words. Exhibit. Joel. Alas for the day of the Lord is at hand, and as a destruction from the Almighty shall it come. Stop right there. You have heard that line before. That is nearly word for word what Isaiah said about Babylon. But Isaiah is long dead, and Babylon is a closed file, and the city he warned about already burned and was already rebuilt. So who exactly is Joel warning? What fire is he smelling on the wind? Pastor Myers slows down hard right here, because this is the discrepancy that breaks the case open a second time. Joel keeps going, and the language only intensifies. Blow ye the trumpet in Zion, and sound an alarm in my holy mountain, for the day of the Lord cometh. For it is nigh at hand, a day of darkness and of gloominess, a day of clouds and of thick darkness, and then, unmistakably cosmic, the sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood, before the great and terrible day of the Lord come. And Joel is not alone. The post-exilic prophets pick up the same cry. Malachi, the very last book of the Old Testament, the final page before 4 centuries of silence. For behold, the day cometh that shall burn as an oven. Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. Zechariah, behold, the day of the Lord cometh. Same accelerant, same signature, same scorch climbing the same wall. But it cannot be Babylon. Babylon is over. Babylon is rebuilt. This is a second fire, a future one, from where these prophets are standing. Another army, another burning of Jerusalem. And the question hangs in the air over the rebuilt city, unanswered, waiting. Who is it this time? And this is where the case reopens from the most unexpected direction in the entire file. Because the witness who finally identifies the second fire is not an Old Testament prophet at all. He's a fisherman, standing in Jerusalem. On the day the Holy Spirit falls, Pastor Myers takes us into the book of Acts, to the day of Pentecost. The Spirit comes down like fire. The crowd is stunned, dumbfounded, and some of them are sneering, muttering that the disciples are drunk on new wine. And Peter, a fisherman, stands up to explain what is happening in front of them. And listen to what he reaches for. Of all the scripture in the world, watch what he pulls off the shelf to make sense of this moment. This is that which was spoken by the prophet Joel. That Joel, the same prophet, the very same day of the Lord prophecy. And Peter quotes it out loud to the crowd. I will pour out of my spirit upon all flesh. The sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood, before that great and notable day of the Lord come. And here is the single detail that almost nobody slows down long enough to feel. Peter says, these are the last days. The last days spoken in the 1st century, with the world still standing 2,000 years later and counting. So which last days was Peter talking about? Pastor Myers, like others who have followed this trail carefully, sets the pieces on the table and lets them click into place on their own. Peter is standing inside Jerusalem. He is quoting a prophecy about the day of the Lord. He is calling his own present moment the last days. He is, in the plainest possible language, telling the people in front of him that an army is coming, that this temple, this city, these walls are under a notice again, that the fire is at the gates a second time, and that there is still time, right now, today, this morning, to walk out of the building before it lights. The second fire is Rome. In the year that history would later mark as 70 AD, the Roman army did to Jerusalem exactly what Babylon had done centuries before. They besieged it, they starved it, they broke it open, and they burned it, and they leveled the temple until, in the words of the one who foresaw it, not one stone was left standing upon another. The second day of the Lord. And here's the confirmation that turns a theory into evidence. Go back and reread Joel's words, the very words Peter quoted, with Rome in mind, a great people and a strong. There hath not been ever the like, neither shall be any more after it. A fire devoureth before them, and behind them a flame burneth. The land is as the Garden of Eden before them, and behind them a desolate wilderness. Yea, and nothing shall escape them. Read that and ask yourself honestly, is that the end of the world? No, that's an army. That's a marching invasion that leaves a garden in front of it and a desert behind it. That's the second fire. So now we have two scenes on the table, Babylon and Rome, centuries apart, filed by different prophets in different ages as different disasters, and laid side by side under the same lamp. They are unmistakably the same event, happening twice. The same city, the same burning, the same notices, delivered and ignored. The same door, unlocked from the inside. Same accelerant, same signature, and an investigator who has now seen the identical fire twice stops asking what burned. He starts asking what poured the accelerant. But before we hunt the cause, Pastor Myers does something that raises the stakes of this entire investigation past anything we've felt so far. He reaches past the 2 closed files and pulls the 3rd, because the Bible does not stop at 2. Exhibit. Paul, writing to the Thessalonians, "For yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night. For when they shall say, Peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape." Same 4 words, the day of the Lord. But this one can't be Babylon, and it can't be Rome, because Paul is writing after Pentecost, after Peter, and he is pointing forward into the dark at something still coming. This is a 3rd occurrence of the phrase, a 3rd fire, and then the file tells you its scale, and the scale is what stops your breath. Peter again, his 2nd letter, "But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in the which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. The earth also and the works that are therein shall be burned up." That's not a city. That's not a wall or a temple or a single nation under an army. That's everything. The 3rd fire is not a building. It's the world. The 3rd day of the Lord is the return of Jesus Christ and the end of the age itself. And here, finally, is the architecture of the entire case. The shape Pastor Myers has been quietly assembling beneath us this whole time. 3 fires. The first burned a city, Babylon over Jerusalem. The second burned the city again, Rome over Jerusalem. The third burns the world. 2 are history, cold cases, closed. 1 is still in the future. And every investigator listening already knows what comes next. It's reflex. If you have a 3rd event in a verified series and you have worked the first 2 down to their cause, you do not treat that 3rd event as a mystery to be solved after the fact. You treat it as a prediction to be made before it happens, because whatever poured the accelerant on the first fire and whatever poured it on the second, if it is the same hand, the same substance, the same signature both times, then you already know with forensic certainty what will pour it on the 3rd. You just have to be willing to read the cause. And the cause is where this case stops being ancient history and starts being about you. Here is the question that reopens everything we thought was settled. Why did the first day of the Lord come at all? Not what happened. We've established what happened. Babylon, the siege, the walls, the burning. The question an investigator asks at this point is narrower and far more dangerous. What was the accelerant? What specifically was poured over this city that turned a standing warning into a consuming fire? And to find it, Pastor Myers does something that feels at first like a detour off the case entirely. He doesn't go to the battlefield. He doesn't go to Babylon. He turns all the way around and walks back to the very beginning of the Bible, to Genesis, to the 7th day. And on the 7th day, God ended his work, which he had made, and he rested on the 7th day from all his work which he had made. And God blessed the 7th day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work. The first time God rests in the entire Bible. And he doesn't merely rest, he builds the rest into the architecture of time itself, the Sabbath. And here is the word to hold on to with both hands, because it becomes the fingerprint that ties all 3 fires together across thousands of years. The Sabbath is a sign that the work was finished, that everything was good, that the world stood complete and at rest under the hand of its maker. Then sin enters, then the long slide, then bondage in Egypt, 400 years of it, then deliverance by a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. And when God reassembles this rescued nation at Sinai, the first thing he does is hand them the Sabbath again, this time carved in stone. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the 7th day. And he gives it a second time in Deuteronomy, with a second reason stitched into it. And remember that thou wast a servant in the land of Egypt, and that the Lord thy God brought thee out thence through a mighty hand. Therefore the Lord thy God commanded thee to keep the Sabbath day. 2 reasons, bound into one sign. The Sabbath remembers creation. The Sabbath remembers deliverance. It is the sign of a finished work and a freed people, all at once. So far, this reads like background, like doctrine, like the part of the file you skim to get to the action, until Pastor Myers turns to the book of Leviticus, and the background detonates into a forensic document. Because in Leviticus, long before the first fire ever burns, God lays out the blessings for obedience and the curses for rebellion. And buried inside the list of curses is a sentence that should lift the hair off your arms, because it describes the crime scene in advance. It photographs the fire before a single flame exists. And I will scatter you among the heathen, and will draw out a sword after you, and your land shall be desolate, and your cities waste. Then shall the land enjoy her Sabbaths, as long as it lieth desolate. Even then shall the land rest and enjoy her Sabbaths. Read it slowly. Read it like an investigator reading a confession. The land will be emptied, the cities laid waste, the people scattered under a drawn sword. And the reason God gives, the explicit, stated reason, is so that the land can finally rest. Finally keep the Sabbaths the people refuse to give it. The curse is not random. It's not generalized doom. It is targeted. It names the accelerant in advance. It tells you, centuries early, exactly what substance is going to be poured on this city. And then the file closes the loop with a coroner's precision. Long after Babylon has finished its work, the chronicler writes the autopsy of the first fire, and look at the cause of death he lists: to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah, until the land had enjoyed her Sabbaths. For as long as she lay desolate, she kept Sabbath, to fulfill 70 years. There it is, in the official record. The first fire, Babylon over Jerusalem, 70 years of desolation, burned specifically because the people would not honor the Sabbath. The land lay empty to make up, by force, the rest it had been denied. And if that still feels like an interpretive leap, Pastor Myers refuses to let you off the hook. He walks you straight to Jeremiah, to the inspection notice itself. The warning slid under the door before the fire ever caught. But if ye will not hearken unto me to hallow the Sabbath day, then will I kindle a fire in the gates thereof, and it shall devour the palaces of Jerusalem, and it shall not be quenched. Read that again. I will kindle a fire in the gates. The accelerant is not a metaphor anymore. God himself names it as fire, and he names exactly what pours it: the rejected Sabbath. Hallow the day, or I kindle a fire in the gates, and it will not be quenched. And then comes Ezekiel, chapter 20. And this is where the evidence stops being a hint and becomes a confession, repeated until you cannot possibly mishear it. God recounts the entire history of this people, from Egypt through the wilderness and over, like a man standing at the scene, pointing at the same scorch mark again and again and again. I gave them my Sabbaths to be a sign between me and them. But the house of Israel rebelled against me, and my Sabbaths they greatly polluted. And again, they polluted my Sabbaths. And again, they polluted my Sabbaths, for their heart went after their idols. How many times does he say it? Pastor Myers makes you count, because the repetition is the evidence. This is not one cause buried among many. This is the cause, stated and restated and stated again, until the file simply cannot be misread by an honest reader. And then he sets the whole thing on a single hinge, and the hinge is so clean it's almost difficult to sit with. The day of the Lord, the day of wrath, came upon Jerusalem because they rejected the day of the Lord, the day of rest. Stay there, stay right there. Two phrases, the day of the Lord, but one is wrath and one is rest. And the people who would not enter the rest were handed the wrath. They refused the Sabbath, the day God offered them, the day of rest, the day that was a sign between him and them. And so the day God offered them came back around the other way and met them as fire in the gates. They rejected the rest, so they received the wrath. The fire didn't break in. It was let in by people who held the notice in their hands and unlocked the door from the inside. That's Exhibit 1, the first signature, lifted clean. Now we test it against the second fire, because a signature isn't a signature until it appears a second time. So the people come home, they rebuild, and there is a man on the construction site named Nehemiah, and he is afraid of one specific thing, afraid the way a man is afraid who has read the report on why the last building burned. He catches his own people trading on the Sabbath again, loading carts, treading wine presses, hauling in sheaves and selling fish in the rebuilt streets. And listen to what he says to them, because he is the inspector standing inside the new building, holding the old fire report up to their faces. What evil thing is this that ye do, and profane the Sabbath day? Did not your fathers thus? And did not our God bring all this evil upon us and upon this city? Yet ye bring more wrath upon Israel by profaning the Sabbath. He names it exactly. You remember why the last building burned. You remember why the fire came. Don't you dare unlock that door again. But here is where the second fire does something the first one did not do. And Pastor Myers traces the turn so precisely you can feel the case bend under your hand. The people do not simply forget the Sabbath this time. They overcorrect. They become so afraid of breaking it that they build a fence around it, and then a fence around the fence. They pile on rule after rule that God never wrote, restrictions you cannot find anywhere in the text, prohibitions with no verse behind them. They become so rigid, so stringent, so consumed with the regulating of it that, in Pastor Myers' words, it is almost as though they manufacture a second Sabbath, a counterfeit, one that looks like the original, one that wears its name and occupies its day. But isn't it? And that's the danger with counterfeits. The closer they resemble the original, the harder they are to detect. So watch what happens when the genuine article walks into the room. Jesus enters a synagogue. There is a man there with a withered hand. And the text, read it as an investigator reads a witness statement, says the religious leaders watched him, whether he would heal on the Sabbath day, that they might accuse him. Stop on that. They are not watching to learn. They are not watching in wonder. They are watching to charge. They have already decided in advance that healing, restoring, mending, making a broken man whole is a crime on this manufactured Sabbath of theirs. And when Jesus heals the man anyway, the verdict comes down instantly. And the Pharisees went forth and straightway took counsel with the Herodians against him, how they might destroy him. Pastor Myers stops the tape right here and makes sure we see what we just watched. This is early. This is Mark chapter 3, the very beginning of the ministry, the opening movement. And this is the first time in the record that the leaders decide Jesus must die. The first death warrant, and the charge written on it is Sabbath breaking. Sit in the horror of that for one full second. The thing that set the whole machine in motion to kill the Messiah, the seed of the entire conspiracy that ends at a cross, was the Sabbath. the counterfeit Sabbath. They moved to destroy the Lord of the Sabbath in the name of a Sabbath he had never commanded. And it is not one isolated reading. Pastor Myers lays the other scenes down beside it, and the pattern only sharpens. The man at the pool of Bethesda, sick 38 years, unable to rise, healed in an instant, told to take up his bed and walk. And the charge that follows him through the streets: "It is the Sabbath day, it is not lawful for thee to carry thy bed." No such law in the Bible. None. And the verdict: "Therefore did the Jews persecute Jesus, and sought to slay him, because he had done these things on the Sabbath day." The man born blind, healed with clay and the pool of Siloam, seeing for the first time in his life, and the official ruling on the miracle. This man is not of God, because he keepeth not the Sabbath day. 3 healings: a hand, a pair of legs, a pair of eyes. And Pastor Myers, slowing down the way he does, will not let us treat them as random. The hand, Ecclesiastes says, "Whatsoever thy hand findeth to do, do it with thy might." The power to work the works of God. The legs, "Thy word is a lamp unto my feet, and a light unto my path." The power to walk in the way of righteousness. The eyes, "Open thou mine eyes, that I may behold wondrous things out of thy law." The power to see the light of the world. Every healing was the Sabbath doing the exact thing God said the Sabbath was for: to loose the bands of wickedness, to let the oppressed go free. The real Sabbath, restoring broken people out in the open, in the daylight, in front of everyone. And they called it a crime. Now follow the timeline to its single, most chilling intersection, the place where the whole counterfeit shows its face. The night they finally take Jesus to be killed, that Friday evening, they are in a hurry. Why? Because the Sabbath is coming. They want the execution finished, the body off the cross, everything ritually clean, so that they can go home and keep the Sabbath. Read that until it lands with its full weight. They murdered the Lord of the Sabbath in order to be clean for the Sabbath. They broke it in the most violent, the most absolute way a human being could break anything, and walked home in the dusk, believing they had kept it flawlessly. That's the second accelerant. Not forgetting the Sabbath, like the first fire. The opposite, counterfeiting it. Building a false Sabbath so rigid, so heavy, so jealously guarded, that they used it to justify killing the very one who made the true one. And Daniel had filed the report on what it would cost centuries in advance. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Messiah cut off, and then the city and the sanctuary destroyed. The second fire, Rome, 70 AD. Same building, same scorch, same door unlocked from the inside, and beneath it, the same signature as the first, the Sabbath. Forgotten at the first fire, counterfeited at the second, but the same fingerprint pressed into both scenes. The same sign, given in Genesis, carved at Sinai, named by Ezekiel as the sign between God and his people, rejected 2 different ways, and both times the rejection let the fire in. So now we have it. 2 scenes, 2 causes, and 1 signature linking them across the centuries. And the investigator's hand is already moving towards the third file. Because if the signature is real, if the fingerprint truly repeats, then the third fire is not a mystery waiting to be solved. It's a forecast waiting to be read. Here is the deduction Pastor Myers walks us into now, and it is the kind of inference a cold case detective waits an entire career to make. The first fire came from forgetting the Sabbath. The second fire came from a counterfeit Sabbath, enforced in the end all the way to death. So what would light the third? And the answer that assembles itself out of the evidence is almost too clean to be comfortable. The third fire would come from both, from forgetting the true Sabbath and from enforcing a counterfeit one with the full force of death behind it. The two accelerants of the first two fires combined, poured together in one final scene at the end of the world. That's the prediction the pattern makes. Now watch the file confirm it. Line by line, Pastor Myers turns to Revelation, to the very last chapters of the case, and finds a people standing in the smoke at the close of history. Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus, a commandment-keeping people at the end of time. And they are visible enough, distinct enough, that something wants them gone, because the very next image the file gives us is a dragon. And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God, and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. War, at the end, made specifically against a commandment-keeping people, and the warning comes with a message. An angel flying through the midst of heaven with an everlasting gospel for every nation, and kindred, and tongue, and people, crying with a loud voice, "Fear God, and give glory to Him, for the hour of His judgment is come. And worship Him that made heaven, and earth, and the sea, and the fountains of waters." Pastor Myers stops on that final line, and you have to stop with him, because those words are lifted, almost syllable for syllable, straight out of the fourth commandment, the Sabbath commandment. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea. The last warning to the entire planet quotes the exact commandment that lit the first two fires. The notice has been written, and it is being slid under the door of the whole world. And then comes the sign, the fingerprint again, surfacing one final time. Revelation chapter 7. 4 angels holding back the 4 winds of destruction, and another angel ascending, having the seal of the living God, sealing God's people in their foreheads before the winds are loosed. And Pastor Myers ties the thread all the way back to where it began, back to Ezekiel, where God said it in so many words. The Sabbath is the sign between me and you, the same sign. From the 7th day of creation, to the stone at Sinai, to the seal in the forehead at the end of the world. The fingerprint on all 3 fires, surfacing in the final chapter as the mark of who belongs to whom. You can't make this up. And now the escalation rises one more level, because Pastor Myers, like others in this tradition, notices the geography of the fires. The first fire came in connection with Babylon. The second came in connection with Rome. And at the very end of the file, Revelation names the final power, and it is somehow both at once. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots. Babylon, the name of the first fire. But seated, the text says, on a power painted in unmistakably Roman colors, the city of the second fire. And in the Bible's symbolic language, a woman represents a church, a religious body. So here, at the end, is a religious power that is Babylon and Rome together. And Daniel describes the very same entity from another angle, a power that would speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws. Think to change times and laws. Pastor Myers lets that sit in the silence. Because of all 10 commandments, only one is about time. Only one begins with the word, remember. And here is a power forecast, centuries in advance, to think it could change exactly that one. A power that has, on the one hand, helped the world forget the true Sabbath, the error that lit the first fire, and on the other hand, lifted up a counterfeit day in its place, the error that lit the second, both accelerants held in one hand at the end of the world. And the prophecy says, a day is coming when that counterfeit will be enforced by decree, by law, the way the leaders once enforced their counterfeit Sabbath upon Jesus, all the way to a cross. Now, and this matters as much as anything in the file, hold one thing steady, exactly the way Pastor Myers holds it. The indictment here is of a system, a structure of power that changed what God wrote. It is not aimed at the sincere believers inside it, millions of them, who love God with their whole hearts, who have never once seen the substitution, who are following the light they were given as faithfully as they know how. The fire was never about individual people. It was always about a door and about who unlocks it. And here, the investigation produces its most uncomfortable exhibit yet, 2 pieces of plain testimony on the record from inside the system itself. A priest, quoted in a newspaper, "It is well to remind the Presbyterians, Baptists, Methodists, and all other Christians that the Bible does not support them anywhere in their observance of Sunday. Sunday is an institution of the Roman Catholic Church, and those who observe the day observe a commandment of the Catholic Church." 2. A Catholic publication, plainer still, Protestants accept Sunday rather than Saturday as the day for public worship after the Catholic Church made the change. But the Protestant mind does not seem to realize that in observing Sunday, they are accepting the authority of the spokesman for the Church, the Pope. Read those as witness statements, and the implication is staggering. By this testimony, given freely from inside, the great bulk of the Christian world has inherited both errors at the same time. The forgetting that lit the first fire, and the counterfeit that lit the second, held together in one hand. At the precise moment, the final warning is going out to every nation on earth. Same accelerant, same signature, the third door, and the hand already resting on the lock. Now Pastor Myers brings the whole case to its breaking point, and he does it with a single pair of words that has been hiding in plain sight underneath this entire investigation from Genesis forward. Rest and wrath. Go back to the book of Hebrews, where the writer reaches for the wilderness generation, the people who came out of Egypt under a mighty hand and then died, every one of them, in the desert, in sight of the land they were promised, and God's verdict on them, "So I swear in my wrath, they shall not enter into my rest." Pastor Myers stops everything and makes us look at the 2 roads buried in that one sentence. There is the rest of God, and there is the wrath of God, and they are not 2 unrelated things. They are not 2 separate doors. They are the 2 outcomes of one single choice. Those who do not enter the rest receive the wrath. There is no third option. Pull the camera all the way back to the end of the world, to Revelation, where the lost cry out to the mountains and the rocks to fall on them and hide them. And hide them from what? From the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? And Pastor Myers asks the question that detonates the whole file. Why the wrath of the Lamb? Why would the gentlest image in all of Scripture, a lamb, the very symbol of meekness and sacrifice, become the thing that people claw at the mountains to escape because they refused his rest? That's the breakthrough. That's the theological crack running through all 3 fires at once, the fracture that connects Babylon and Rome and the end of the world along a single line. The wrath of the Lamb is nothing other than the rest of the Lamb, refused. The day of the Lord, the wrath, falls on those who reject the day of the Lord, the rest. It happened at the first fire. They rejected the Sabbath rest. The Babylon fire was the wrath. It happened at the second fire. They counterfeited the rest and killed the Lord of it. The Roman fire was the wrath, and it will happen at the third. Hebrews says it without flinching. There remaineth therefore a rest to the people of God. Still, remaining, on the table, right now, tonight. And here is where Pastor Myers turns the entire investigation around and points it gently at the person listening. The way you'd turn a lamp slowly off the evidence and onto the witness in the chair, because that rest was never only about a square on a calendar. The Sabbath was always the sign of something underneath it, the sign of a finished work, of a people who finally stopped striving and let God do the saving. To enter the rest is to let Jesus come into you and give you rest from the works of your own flesh. Rest from lawlessness. Rest from lying, from coveting, from the exhausting grinding labor of being your own God and your own Savior. The true Sabbath and the true rest were always the same thing wearing two faces. And the counterfeit in every single age was the refusal to enter it, whether by forgetting it or by burying it under a mountain of rules until the life was crushed out of it. So the enemy, Pastor Myers shows us, has run the very same play 3 times with 2 variations. At the first fire, the Sabbath, you don't need it, let it go, it's nothing. At the second fire, fine, keep a Sabbath, but make it a counterfeit and guard that counterfeit to the death. And at the third, at the end of all things, both at once, combined, forget the true one, enforce the false one, and put the force of law and the threat of death behind it. Same accelerant, same signature, 3 fires, 1 refusal, wearing 3 different masks. And the refusal is always, underneath every mask, the refusal of rest. So we come back, at last, to the scene where we started. The investigator in the ash, 2 closed files in one hand, and a third building in front of him that hasn't burned yet. 2 fires are history. Babylon, Rome, both warned, both notified repeatedly in writing. Both let the fire in from the inside, through a door they were begged not to unlock, and unlocked anyway. The third fire is the only one still standing in front of us, unlit, and Pastor Myers leaves us with the one detail that will not let the case close. He returns to Nehemiah, standing in the rebuilt city in the failing light, watching the merchants who would not stop trading on the Sabbath, the men who cared more for the sale than for the sign. And watch what he does. He shuts the gates. When the gates of Jerusalem began to be dark before the Sabbath, I commanded that the gates should be shut, that there should no burden be brought in on the Sabbath day. And the merchants turned away, locked out, lodged without Jerusalem. Outside, the gates closed against them. And then the thread snaps tight across the entire Bible, from Nehemiah's dusk to the end of the world, because Revelation describes the final city, the New Jerusalem, with its own gates, and the very same line, and there shall in no wise enter into it anything that defileth. The merchants of the earth, who drank the wine of Babylon, who chose their own work over God's rest, outside the wall, and the gates of that final city open only to one kind of people. Blessed are they that do his commandments, that they may have right to the tree of life, and may enter in through the gates into the city. In, through the gates. The very same gates Nehemiah once shut against the men who would not rest. So here is where the case stands tonight. There is a notice under the door. There is a fire that hasn't lit. There is a sign that has burned, unbroken, through every page of this file, from the 7th day of creation to the stone at Sinai, to the seal in the foreheads of God's people at the end of the world. And there are, in the end, only two ways, only ever two, to receive the day of the Lord, as rest or as wrath, the same day, the same Lord, and the wrath is only ever the rest, refused. Two buildings have already burned to prove it, and the third door is standing right in front of you, unlocked, with your own hand resting on it. And the only question the evidence leaves on the table is the one question no investigator can ever answer on your behalf. Which way will you open it? The case isn't closed, it's just reached you. If you want to walk the original trail yourself, to hear Pastor Ivor Myers lay out the 3 days of the Lord in his own words, verse by verse, exhibit by exhibit, the full sermon, and every future investigation lives on the Living Manna Online Church YouTube channel. Subscribe and keep following the evidence, because some files were never meant to stay sealed, and this one is wide open.